Since ancient times, the area around Almaty was called the land of apples. Unpretentious wild apple trees with small sweet and sour fruits grew in the foothills and gorges of the Trans-Ili Alatau. It was among these mountains where back in the 18th century, traveler and botanist Johann Sivers discovered a forest of previously unknown fruit trees. Ever since then, this species of wild apple trees bears his name. Science has proved that the Sievers apple tree is the ancestor of all the apple trees on Earth. But it was the Alexandria aport apple variety that brought international fame to Almaty orchards. At the end of the 19th century, a migrant from the Ostrog county of the Voronezh province named Redko brought several aport seedlings to Kazakhstan. Plain-looking tiny trees ended up giving an unheard amount of harvest. Exceptionally, fragrant apples were as big as a child's head. Thus began the victorious march of the aport apple in Jetisu. Nowadays, the famous aport vanished. This apple variety requires a lot of selection work. But Almaty is still considered the city of apples. Therefore, the forum, organized as part of the city's public initiative Alma Apple, was called Almaty, the land of apples, economic, environmental and cultural perspectives. Famous gardeners from Italy and Germany, experts on valuable apple varieties, writers and scientists were invited to the forum. Local farmers presented an exhibition of local varieties of apples and apple products. Kurt Wirth, a renowned expert of apple and grape varieties, is among the guests. He has been cultivating apple trees in northern Italy and advising gardeners around the world for more than 50 years.
So Kazakhstan has two sides of apple production. One is the commercial one, and as conditions, soil and water and whatever, is in a good position in Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan has also a good potential for the commercial production. But this is a total different thing to the historical one, and I think both of them Kazakhstan has an incredible potential and chance to develop. In one part to protect, and the other part to be progressive in the commercial orchards.
What are the prospects for commercial gardening in Kazakhstan? What are the methods of growing apples in Jetisu these days? Let's pay a visit to one of the farms of the Almaty region. Golden Delicious is a popular and beloved apple variety in Kazakhstan. About 10-15 years ago, it was growing in every countryside cottage, in every garden. This apple type is easy to store, it is juicy and a good bearer. Here they took up industrial production and fruits are unusually large. Our apples are excellent. Allotment gardeners grow apples the old-fashioned way. The crops are small and gardens are infected by the codling moth. But here, on farms near the village of Malavodnaya, for the first time I saw large-scale industrial gardening where science and technology play a leading role. Apple road trains scurry back and forth, bringing delicious cargo to warehouses. Everyone working in apple harvesting division knows the technology of how to gather and transport them. Are apples capricious cargo from a driver's perspective? Any perishable cargo is considered capricious. What is the peculiarity of apple transportation? There's a need to maintain the required temperature. If you pick up a cargo from the refrigerator with a temperature of plus 2 degrees Celsius, this temperature must be maintained throughout the transportation. Gardens stretch to the horizon. There is an anti-hail net above them. The weather in these places is treacherous. Massive thunderstorms come right after the summer heat. After all, the orchards are next to the mountains of Trans-Ili Alatau. We can't stop marveling over espaliers, low, fairly thin trunks bearing up to 18 kilograms of apples. Why 18? Because each tree gives 90 fruits, each weighing 200 grams. That's why they need espaliers. Let's talk about them. Where were these trellises made? In this country? These trellises were made in Russia. We have 2 more sites with last year's plantings where we used Italian trellises. Why do you use trellises for the apple orchard? This is unusual. This is an intensive orchard. You may even say super intensive. This means that it contains between 3,000 and 5,000 trees per hectare. Let's say that a row is 260 meters long. The distance between the trees is 80-90 centimeters, meaning there might be 300 trees on one row. Therefore, one tree bears up to 20 kilos of apples. This is a heavy load. I call trellis the skeleton of a garden, if we think of it anatomically. They serve as a spine of the orchard.
Это кости, на которых держится все остальное.
Вертебра, да, получается, позвоночник.
The farm is using drip irrigation for watering the apple trees. I was surprised to see that the pipes were not dug into the ground, but stretched high above the surface of the soil. This is to ensure uniform watering, Tamerlan said, and pipes are easier to clean this way. Apple trees are watered more generously during the blooming season. The process of fruit cells multiplication requires a lot of water, which is also needed to ensure the fruits ripen at the right time. Tamerlan, do you consider proximity of the mountains a plus or a minus for the apple orchard? This is a plus. It is recommended to plant gardens in the foothills so that there is a slope. One of the reasons is ventilation, a breeze. Why do you think the breeze is important? Because of the temperature drop. The air descending from the mountains is cool. It is quite chilly at night time. This temperature difference is needed for apples to ripen faster, especially red varieties. Here we have yellow apple. This is not so important to eat because yellow apples can be picked up green. They will ripen during the storage. Red apple acquires its red color only during a temperature difference. This is important. That is why apples in the mountains are tastier and more fragrant. Because of the sharp temperature difference, the ripening fruits generate ethylene, the aging hormone. This element boosts the breakdown of starch and glucose into sugars, and apple gains its juiciness and sweet taste. Ethylene is sometimes called the hormone of ripeness. It can accelerate the ripening of other fruits and vegetables if placed next to apples. Another thing worth noting, the fruits of local gardens are large, without a single wormhole. Nariman Tursunbayev provides protection of orchards from pests. He is a PhD in nanotechnology and has studied in Germany and Turkey. What are pheromones and how do they help in dealing with pests? Pheromone traps are disorienting insects. For instance, females are unable to find males. What else are you treating orchards with? Mainly with selective biopesticides that are not harmful to the environment and to humans. Every spring, dozens of farms and companies specializing in growing apples plant new orchards. Hundreds and thousands of young apple trees grow in Karakimer, Malovodne, and in the Sarkant region. Volunteers, mainly young Almaty residents, participate in large-scale tree planting campaigns. Everyone understands that apple orchards must be revived. For Dinara Ristinbekova and her husband Askar Sabirov, apple orchards have become an important part of their life. The young couple thought of doing business on the American continent once, but they didn't leave and stayed to work in their motherland. Why did you choose this place for growing apples? There is an optimal windrows in this area, the most optimal groundwater flows, the cleanest mountain water feeding these wonderful trees. This is God's gift, an opportunity that Askar and I decided to embrace. We take advantage of what nature has given to us. Gardening is not an easy job. Experienced foremen employ women to harvest apples. You know why? Because women's hands are much more tender. They gently remove the fruits and carefully stack them in containers. And that's when the norm is 1,000 kilograms per day. The art of picking apples is taught by experienced team leaders like Samat Tleuzhanov. My all-time favorite apple variety since childhood is Golden Delicious. I love these apples. They store well. The main thing is to pick the fruit correctly, with a stalk and not to damage the pollen. Then the fruit can be stored for 5-6 months. Collecting apples is a real art. That's what I understood by listening to a professional. An apple is taken carefully with 2 hands, trying not to damage or knock down pollen. You press the stalk. You need to be gentle and not tear it off. And carefully, as with the child, we put it in a special bucket. I'll show you what will happen to this bucket next. Look at that. That's a special bucket for harvest. Look at the fruits pouring out. Here is the hook. It takes out everything with one movement. The sleeve is dragged, the bucket rises, and apples carefully roll out into the container with practically zero damage.
Выкатываются в контейнер, и практически они не повреждаются.
While I was collecting apples, I've noticed a curious thing, a stencil glued to a fruit. This is how the farmers mark the trees, the fruits from which will go to foreign consumers, to Europe, to the Arab countries. When fruits ripen, the stencil is removed. This year's harvest is large. Apples must be picked quickly, otherwise they will overripe. Therefore, farmers are using the following technique. This is not exactly a cart, nor a tractor. From up here, from the height of the 2nd story, I see far down below how apples are gathered. Now we'll see how this happens. This is a great method. In the past, people used ladders to pick apples. Now they are considered archaism. We drive between 2 rows. It's great that no ladders are needed. Just take the fruit, tear it off and put it in a container. There are ripe apples at the very top, and picking them is not a problem. There is no need to tilt the crown, bending and breaking branches. Everything is at hand's reach. How convenient! Imagine when there are 6-8 pickers in this machine. just how quickly the professional harvesting goes. Apple by apple, we empty the tree, filling storehouses, contents of which will bring so much joy to Kazakhstanis in winter.
Порадуют казахстанцев.
There are few varieties that local farmers prefer to grow in Almaty orchards. Those are mostly winter varieties which can be stored for a long time and are suitable for transportation. In addition to Golden Delicious, there are Fuji, Red Chief, Florina, Ida Red and others. And here are the apples of the summer variety Galar. Medium-sized, red, pretty fragrant, very juicy. I score them 5 out of 5. A little starchy in my opinion, they won't be stored for long. But right now, they are perfect.
Долго они храниться не будут. Но сейчас в самый раз.
Why is this tiny crab apple planted among these large fruit trees? I don't think this is an oversight. It's a common practice in industrial gardening to grow pollinating species next to main variety, not just one single kind. People planted flower gardens for intra-pollination to increase the harvest. Golden Delicious variety is planted in our orchard, and we used wild crab apples as the so-called pollinators.
Раечки дикие, так называемые поллинаторы, они служат или выполняют функцию опылителей.
Agronomist Saken Hasetov is an experienced specialist and is open to everything new. Along with his tool for pruning trees, he carries an English textbook with him. He is learning this foreign language to communicate with colleagues from abroad. Saken visited the largest horticultural plantations of different countries as a member of Kazakhstani farmers' delegations. How do our gardens differ from European and American ones? Do we have certain advantages? The equipment, the availability of equipment, the technologies we use. I was in Germany and Italy, they don't have equipment as ours. Farmers in West America also have less advanced equipment. There are other things we need to mention though. There is a difference between European and American orchards. American orchards are denser. Therefore, productivity is much higher. According to the farmers, from 80 to 120 tons per hectare. In Europe, it's about 50 to 80 tons per hectare.
Европа, я бы скажу, наверное, где-то ориентируется где-то на 50-80 тонн урожая.
And what about us? Our yields range from 35 to 65 tons, depending on the year of planting and life expectancy of the tree. It means that we get similar harvests. There are both positives and negatives. Positives, we have more sun, the weather is favorable. The vegetation period lasts longer. Unlike in the US, we have a very hot July and very cold January. Trees get stressed.
Очень жаркий июль, очень холодный январь, декабрь вот получается. И деревьям несколько, они стрессуют, то есть стрессы получают.
Gardening is a family business. Knowledge, experience and love for working in the countryside are passed down from one generation to another. Therefore, gardeners from different countries are proud of their centennial gardens. For Oskar Sabirov, growing apples is something he took over from his grandfather, a war veteran who survived the tragedy of a fierce, bloody battle near Rif. His grandfather was mobilized to the front in 1941. 2 years later, after being wounded, he returned to Kazakhstan. I remember very well how in 1975-1976 I was carrying buckets to water apple trees. Years later, when I grew up a little bit, my grandfather told me that all of his friends died near Rzev. The company consisted of 120 soldiers. In 4 days they were all gone. So he planted 120 apple trees upon return. He named each tree by the name of his fallen comrade. No matter how well he knew them, he was a squad leader. He commemorated his soldiers in such an unusual way. Oskar has always dreamed of having his own orchard, for every morning to start with the fragrance of juicy ripe apples. For a city dweller, the countryside was a new, unusual thing. He didn't have enough knowledge or experience, and the business needed to be established from scratch. However, he didn't step down from his dream and planted the first 27 hectares. That's the origin of apple orchards in Malovodnaya. You have to love it, you have to live for it, and understand that it won't be 5, 10, or even 15 years. This is something to do for the rest of your life. More than 30 years ago, this large Almaty canal was built here, in the foothills of the Trans-Ili Alatau, by the initiative of the head of the Republic of that time, Din Muhammad Kunaev. Life-giving water came to this place. Thanks to that, the area became suitable for planting apple orchards and vineyards. Water gave life to this region's agriculture. In a picturesque valley at the feet of the Sakha Mounds, vineyards have spread. This is Karakimer, Almaty region. Those sunberries take 110 hectares of land. Grapes have been cultivated here since ancient times. Jugs with grape seeds were found inside the Sakha Mounds. Thousands or maybe tens of thousands of grapevines are growing on this plantation. Dana, which varieties are grown here? Here we have a Pinot Noir variety. This is a French variety, very famous in Europe. It grows in France and Burgundy. It means we have our own piece of Burgundy in Kazakhstan. It is translated from French as black cone. If you look at a bunch, you can see that it looks like a cone. Its berries are tiny and black. It's very sweet, and it has a thick skin.
Виноград очень сладкий, имеет толстую кожуру.
In the late 80s of the last century, after an anti-alcohol policy in the USSR, most of the vineyards of Karakimer fell into desolation. Plantations overgrew with grass and weeds, but the vines, in spite of everything, remained healthy. In 2006, one entrepreneur bought the vineyards, and next year the revival of valuable grape varieties had begun. Where do these varieties come from? Did you bring them from somewhere in Europe, or are these local adapted varieties? These are adapted varieties that were cultivated back in the Soviet Union. When we were reviving the vineyards, we cultivated what was planted 30 to 40 years ago. All right. Do wine growers who cultivate this crop find soil suitable for these purposes? The soil is very rich in minerals. We also use alpine water, which also contains a lot of minerals. Most vines in local vineyard have their own roots. They have string root system, meaning that the vine can bear fruit up to 100 years. There are also French varieties on a rootstock. Grafted varieties have a productivity of up to 25 years. Grapes are grown in the old antique manner. All operations with vines, as pruning and gathering, are carried out manually. It is believed that the warmth of human hands gives berries special flavor. Grapes are amazing plants. In addition to being a fount of nutrients and vitamins, they also have almost magical properties.
Это на самом деле уникальные.
Truly, it is a unique plant. Grapevine, like humans, is capable of preserving DNA, the memory of climatic conditions of the place in which it grew. In ancient times, when peoples fought among themselves and someone had to migrate, the soldiers took a vine with them, stored it, and this allowed the people who migrated to grow grapes again.
На шею, и тем самым это позволяло, допустим, народу, который перекочевал, высадить снова виноград.
Here it is, the grape of Karakymer. Magnificent, a little more here than usual. Farmers put less into carts to avoid grapes smashing together. Then they load boxes onto small trucks dragged by donkeys, which is cheaper and more environmentally friendly. The cargo is taken to a warehouse for storage. The valley near the snow-capped mountains is a unique terroir for many grape varieties. Gewürztraminer, Merlot, Malbec, Urkatseteli, Cabernet, Riesling, Saperavi, and Auxerrois. And this is not a complete assortment of what is growing here. It took decades to determine which grape varieties can bear fruit well in these climatic conditions. This is a field with young grapes of French varieties. They were brought on a grafted root. We planted it on its own root. After 1 year, it demonstrated good growth. We plan to replace all grafted varieties with varieties on their own roots. Therefore, we created a nursery, and we grow our own grapes vines. Nuruddin Aliyev has been cultivating grapes for 35 years. This is not an easy job, says the agronomist. The work begins in early spring. It's necessary to tie the vine in time, remove extra sprouts, mow the wheat so that the grapes are purged. This prevents disease. To water vineyards plentifully 2-3 times in the season. There are many things to do until late autumn, when the vineyard is prepared for winter. We really want to create our very own Kazakhstani brand, for the whole world to know that grapes do grow in Kazakhstan and that there are places where unique grape varieties are being grown. Every autumn, the local winery invites everyone to take part in the harvest, enjoy the beautiful scenery and the taste of ripe berries. Music is playing, people dancing, chatting, and the owners generously treat them with young wine and local cuisine dishes. Well-known experts and wine connoisseurs who believe that Kazakh winemaking has a great future ahead are among the guests. The uniqueness of the terroir, soil and care is an important aspect for winemaking in general. Therefore, I believe that things should go forward without hesitation, and the government should pay attention to the winemaking of their country, as there is an opportunity to make high-quality wines. Winemaking also contributes to the development of tourism and gastronomy. All this together will be a worthy advancement, both for the country and for its producers who know how to make good wine. According to the well-known Russian sommelier Roman Sosnovsky, Karakymer's vineyards are authentic, exotic in some ways to winemaking, and its produce will be highly appreciated in many markets of the world. In fact, the grapes are in good condition, ripe, berries with almost no ripple. There is a small fraction, but it will not have any effect in the end product. This is the grape that you get when you are in harmony with the earth, the nature, and when you don't use heavy chemicals to till the ground. Orchards and vineyards of Jetesu received a second life thanks to people who invested their hearts and part of their lives. To turn ordinary land into a blooming garden was their dream, which has come true. And in return, the land favors them generously with a great harvest for their dedicated work and perseverance.